I'm in the back of the ambulance, could hardly breathe. And the next minute, I was on the other side. Bang, I'd left my body. I looked down, I had no clothes on. I could see my little feet there, and they were touching the grass, which was the softest fur that you can ever imagine. And to my right, there was something that looked like a classical Greek building. Everything was white. Roads were super white. The sky was the bluest blue you've ever seen. Everything felt so welcoming. There was 2 men and 3 women up ahead in front of me. The first woman says, "Raymond's here." I floated forward. And the next thing, I'm next to the other man who's got a brown book in his hand, and he looks like Santa Claus. He's got a Santa Claus beard, all dressed in white, but he's reading this book, and I was hovering to where his shoulder was. I looked at the book.
The A.J. Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast.
We're here with Raymond O'Brien. He had several near-death experiences. Hello, Raymond. How are you?
Hi, AJ. I'm very well.
I would like to know what happened that day that you died and had several near-death experiences. Can you go back to that day and tell us what happened?
I remember being at my mother's one day, and she said, "Something bad is going to happen to you." And I said, "What's that, Mum?" She said, "If you don't change your ways." I was heavily into alcohol. I was running away from the skills I had, basically. And I said, "Well, it'll have to be pretty bad, Mum, because I wasn't a very nice man." She went, "It'll be bad." And so that was on a Wednesday. On a Sunday at 12 o'clock, I died outside here in the ambulance. I went to bed, lay down in bed, lay on my side, and had the most dreadful chest pain. I got up and I did some press-ups by the side of the bed, and it must have opened the artery up in my heart. And I got good blood flow, went back to bed, lay down in bed again. Oh, most incredible pain again. Got back out of bed, did some more press-ups, went back to bed. Within seconds of being in bed, my body was telling me, "You're in trouble. There's something wrong." And I remember pulling my legs over the side of my bed. I was living on my own at the time. And I remember saying to myself, "You're in trouble, Ray. You're in big trouble." And I got up, went downstairs, and I turned the living room light on. And my cat looked at me, and he had this look on his face of, "Wow, you look really rough." And I remember looking at him and going, "Yeah, my cat was called Bill." I went, "Yeah, I know, Bill. I feel really crook." And I had a cordless phone in my front room. And I thought, I have to call an ambulance. I couldn't breathe, literally couldn't breathe. And here in the UK, to call the paramedics, you hit 3 9s. I hit 2 9s, and the next thing, I blacked out. And so I'm lying on the floor. And I had saved my cat's life about 3 months beforehand. He was being attacked by a dog, and I beat the dog off. And I remember pointing to my cat saying, "You owe me one, dude. You owe me one." Right? So I'm lying on the floor, unconscious, probably waiting for the final cardiac arrest to finish me off. And I'd smelt something, and this rasp on my nose. And it opened my eyes, maybe come around. And I've opened my eyes, and there's my cat's face. He's looking at me. And the alarm bells are ringing in my head. And I remember thinking, you have to hit the last number, the last 9 for the ambulance. I hit that. And it was close to 12 o'clock at night. Got through to the operator. She told me to stay on the line, don't move. The ambulance is on its way. And so I live in a quiet town, and I could hear the ambulance off in the distance getting closer. Still got the operator on the end of the line. She told me to open the front door. I was a fit man, AJ, I tell you, a very fit man. That's what kept me alive. I got up off my sofa to open the front door, and I felt like I was 100 years old. I swear. I felt the life dripping off me, literally dripping off my elbows onto the floor. I got to the front door. I opened the front door. I went back and sat down with my cat. I drifted in and out of realities, to be honest with you. The next thing, the paramedics, they pushed the door open. And they came in with their great big box light. There was a man, a male and female. Don't remember the guy's name, but I remember the female called Rebecca. That was her name. And I remember him looking at me, and he went, "Whoa, you look a bit rough, fella." And yeah, I could hardly breathe. So they walked me out to the ambulance, like a 100-year-old man. And I'm in the back of the ambulance, could hardly breathe. I sat down on the gurney, and Rebecca was the one who was attending to me. And I kept for any of your viewers out there, one of the symptoms of a heart attack, stroke, severe heart event is that you'll start being nauseous. You'll start vomiting. Be aware of that. Don't just think it's something I had to eat. It's a common theme, which I soon found out. So I'm in the back of the ambulance. I said, I feel sick. So she gave me a sick bowl, and I started to be sick. And she looked at the sick bowl and she went, no wonder you don't feel well. And I gave her the bowl back, and she turned her back on me. And it was at that moment where I thought, and this is the truth, I put my chin to this shoulder, and I remember saying, if ever there's a time to check out, Ray, now's that time. And so I was consciously aware of what was coming next. And I put my chin on my shoulder, and the next minute I was on the other side. Bang, I'd left my body. I was a tiny, sexless soul standing probably about 4 foot tall. I looked down. I had no clothes on. I could see my little feet there, and they were touching the grass, which was the softest fur that you can ever imagine. And the next thing that hit me was the wind. It came from my right, and it ran through me, went all the way through me. I felt it. I felt every drop of that breeze run through me. That was the first sentient being that I'd met. It felt like the gatekeeper to wherever I was. It was, and as it passed through me, it was literally from my right hand side, it passed through me, and it was the warmth. It went through every single fiber of my body. It knew me. It wasn't going to let me in. If I wasn't, for whatever reason, I knew this was the guard dog of wherever I was. And as it passed through me, it was a cascade of emotions as it went through me. It spoke to me. It let me know where I was. It was okay to be here. You're all right. You're safe here. Bearing in mind, I was naked. So that was another. I really imagine being somewhere where you're at home and then suddenly you feel like you're somewhere else, but you're naked. I was trying to take all of this in, but I felt so comfortable. I've never felt such a sense of peace, and I never have since, to be honest. If you put together all of the drugs that I'd taken over those many years, it doesn't even scratch the surface to the sense of peace that I was getting there. It was huge. I couldn't wait to stay. Honestly, I could not wait. Just by the wind running through me, it was like, oh, wow, I have to have this. I have to have this. But I was denied. So it was a very powerful thing. And I've met the wind here in this world. There's that connection between the two worlds. So it wasn't just there. And there's been times when I stepped outside and I felt the same go through me. So I haven't figured that out. But for those of us who are experiencing that, you're not losing your mind. It does happen. It does speak to me. The wind, it's a beautiful thing to me. Whereas before, I always used to perceive the wind as a destructive force. But yeah, an amazing experience, and I've never forgotten. Absolutely never forgotten that. The strength of that is just phenomenal because it connects me now with the wind here. The experience is one that just still gives to this very day. So I found that very powerful, I must admit.
Were you in a meadow? Were you in a field? What do you remember about the surroundings?
My surroundings I remember the grass was really green. So everything was a heightened color. And you've got to bear in mind that they haven't given me any drugs yet because I've just gone. But I've been there before because I had this heart issue. I didn't identify. I thought they were dreams, but they weren't. And a girl who I used to date used to say to me, you freak me out at night because you stop breathing and then you start breathing again. And I thought I must have been dying and then coming back. And so there I was, and I've met these people before. There was 2 men and 3 women, and the surroundings, it was like I was outside. I was almost in something like I would say it was a meadow. It was an open space. I couldn't see any buildings. They were just up on this little, and to my right, there was something that looked like a classical Greek building just to my right. And Everything was white. Roads were super white. The sky was the bluest blue you've ever seen. Everything felt so welcoming. It was just, and I've never experienced, I've got no, back in my early days, I'd done an awful lot of hallucinogenic drugs. So I know the difference between where I was and what I was seeing. I knew how to talk about it. I knew how to process it. So I knew that I was coming back, but I had to fill my boots before I came back with what I was seeing. And so I was aware of that. And I stood there and I remember thinking, where are they going to send me to get my wings? That was the truth. I couldn't believe I hadn't thought that when I was there. And there was 2 men and 3 women up ahead in front of me. And the first woman turned. They were all dressed in white togas. The 3 women had white veils on their heads, but they were very tall. That was the thing that struck me the most. These people are really tall. And the lady turned and she looked at me and she smiled. And then she turned her head back and spoke to the woman on her right. She looked past the first woman. And then as she was looking past, the 3rd woman looked past her. And they all straightened up. And the first woman who looked at me said, and this is really bizarre because later on, the man who I'm going to describe to you made another appearance, but in this real life. Got 3 women, got the 2 men, far enough away from them, maybe 15 meters away from them. The first woman says to a young guy, maybe about 45, something like that, grey hair, Raymond's here. And as she said, Raymond's here, I floated forward. And the next thing, I'm next to the other man who's got a brown book in his hand. And he looks like Santa Claus. Right? He's got a Santa Claus beard, just like I said, all dressed in white. But he's reading this book. And I was hovering to where his shoulder was because I had the ability to hover there. I was now at his shoulder. And I looked at the book, but I couldn't see the words. And he didn't even look up. All he said was, he shouldn't be here. And he did that. And bang, I was back in my body. I come back, I wake up, but they haven't resuscitated me yet. So this is the other thing. I've come back of my own accord. And as far as they've got is that they've cut my t-shirt open. And they're prepping to resuscitate me. And I've woken up, and I've propped myself up on this elbow, on my right elbow, and I'm looking up at her. And the first words that come out of my mouth were, "I'm really sorry about that." She said, "Why are you sorry?" I said, "I was just on the other side there." And she said, "Do you go on the other side a lot, Ray?" Because I didn't know that I didn't know that I'd actually died. I genuinely didn't know. I didn't understand the connection between the two. She said, "Do you go on the other side a lot, Raymond?" I said, "Yeah, I do." I said, "I come from a family of seers. If you park the ambulance, I'll make you a cup of tea and I'll tell you all about it." She looked at me. I'm looking up at her. She looked down at me. She went, no, Ray. And there was a clock to my left, an electronic red LED clock. She reached across me. She flicked it with her finger. She said, "You see this clock?" I've looked to my left. I went, "Yeah." She said, "You died at exactly 12 o'clock, Raymond." She said, "All of the clock went to 0. When we heard you flatline, because they had me like all the probes on me." She said it was 12 o'clock. She went, "And I've never seen that before." She said that was new to me. And so, okay. I'm thinking, don't say anything. If they've obviously got it wrong, they've come to the wrong house, they've picked up the wrong patient, and they're going to take the wrong patient to hospital. So I'm feeling all right. I am feeling great, to be honest with you. I'm thinking, I don't know what all the fuss is about, but it'll all be over in a couple of hours, Ray. They'll understand they've made a mistake, and you'll be back home by the sun comes up. We pulled up outside the hospital, which was pretty local to me. And again, really surreal to be in the back of the ambulance and seeing the blue lights flash off all of the windows of the houses as you flash by, and wondering why you're in the back of the ambulance. So I'm trying to comprehend that. What's going on? I know something's happening to me and I don't quite get it. And then at that point, the ambulance, I heard it back up. I heard the beeper going beep, and then the doors, bang. The doors are open, and then everyone was just, I got bounced out of the ambulance. People were, I heard them say 47-year-old male, cardiac arrest in the back of the ambulance, been resuscitated. We've given him this, we've given him that. And I'm thinking, they got it all wrong. You've made a big mistake. And I'm watching, Asia, I'm watching the fluorescent lights go over my head. And everything's quite calm up to this moment. And then I'm in the ICU room, and it's just like my world had been turned inside out. I get taken off the trolley and I get put onto a gurney. And I don't know how many people are in the room, maybe 6 or 7, something like that. And that's when they started. I must have died again. That's when that's when it went from, this is all right, to, oh my God, wow. Oh, and as I'm trying to comprehend that, this little Irish voice I heard from my right hand side say my name, Raymond. And I've turned and I've looked at her. I've gone, yeah. She said, we need your next of kin's telephone number. And I remember thinking, what? You're having a laugh, aren't you? I had to ask her, am I that bad? And she said, yeah. She said, we're not sure that you're going to make it. I remember looking at the clock, and it was about, I don't know, maybe about 20 past 12, something like that. And so I gave her my mother's contact details. I said, but only contact her if I don't live, because my mum's very frail. And if you give her false news, that he might die and he doesn't. I said, it might kill her anyway. So I've got that presence of mind. And then it went from a beautiful experience to some of the most, I don't know whether you or any of your viewers are going to watch this have ever experienced it, but I was the loneliest man on the planet. I've never felt so isolated. I knew I was dying. I knew I was going to die. And it was a rush. It was a rush of information. And it was really scary. Woo! I felt the life drain out of me. I felt my body go cold. There was nothing I could do about it. I felt it was almost as if I could see a life force draining out from the side of my waist. I watched it. I literally watched it flow out like a river, and something moved in the ICU unit, which wasn't human. It was different. It wasn't of human form, and it moved. I watched it move from the right-hand corner of the room, and it moved along the wall. It was like a black shadow, like a smudge, but I knew it was for me. I knew that it was connected with me, and then I was on the other side again. And I met a guy there who come to see me. In the early years, he had a brain tumor. He came over from California to see me and wanted me to, I can't even believe I'm telling you this. He wanted me to keep him alive, to help him stay alive so he could say goodbye to everybody. The doctors had said he didn't have long. I'm surprised he even was able to travel from LA. He was English anyway, but his wife was from California. And I met him on the other side. And I went to a place where everything was grey. Everything was a different shade of grey. And I was a little tiny soul. And I moved along with a crowd of people. It was like a football match had ended. And the way people were really tightly packed together, I thought, where am I? And at that moment, I started rising. And as I started rising up between people's legs, I got to shoulder height. And there was this guy who came to see me from California, California Dave. And he's looked at me really startled. And I've looked at him really startled. And he said the same thing to me. Ray, what are you doing here? You're not supposed to be here. And I remember replying to him, I know, Dave, I don't know why I'm here. And I'm still rising. And as I'm rising up, I can now look above the sea of heads. And everyone has got their head down. And they look like they really have a really heavy loading upon them. And I remember looking at them and thinking, oh, this is incredible. And I see the wind coming. The wind was something that it wasn't like the wind I'd met first time. It was like razor wire, and it cracked as it had a life of its own. It tumbled across the top of these people. At points, it would just shatter into all these little bits of dust, and it looked like razor wire exploding. And so you've got to bear in mind that while obviously my heart has already stopped, So now the crash team are now working on me while I'm in a different reality. So they're working away on me. And the next thing I know is that my nose is on the ceiling tiles. I can see all of the little pimples of the ICU unit, and I'm falling backwards. I felt this sensation of falling backwards, and I've landed in my body with a real crash. And I remember waking up like feeling really exhausted. And I could hear the crash teams going, "Ray, it's us. Stop fighting us. It's us." So I had two people on either leg and two people on either arm. And I remember swearing at them, telling them, asking them what the hell did they think they were doing to me? Let me go. And then what happened? I went again, bang. But this time I didn't go anywhere. What I did, I ended up sitting on my forehead as a soul. And I remember feeling how cold my forehead was, clammy and cold. I'm now sitting on my forehead. And I remember feeling how cold my forehead was, clammy and cold it was. I could feel that. And
it was an out-of-body experience this time?
Yeah. I'm now sitting on my forehead and I'm looking down at my body and I can see the crash team working on me. And what really struck me, sounds peculiar now, was when they were working on me, my body flopped from side to side. It had this kind of, I'm now, as I said, the soles of my feet are on my forehead. And as a soul, I'm looking at everything. And there was one of the members of the crash team. He was the guy who was resuscitating me. And so I'm on my forehead, I'm hunched up, and I've looked, his name was Barry. And I've looked at him, and I can't remember what number this was, like of where they were resuscitating me. It was getting on for the 10th, because I felt that they were about to give up. He stopped, and before he hit me with the boom again, he looked at everybody else, and I've looked at him, and this is what he said: "If this doesn't bring him round, nothing will." And I remember looking at him going, he doesn't know that this is going to really hurt me. And I tell you what, that defibrillator, oh, wow. To be hit with that is another thing. To be hit with it so many times as I was another thing. And he hit me with it, and I remember being sucked back into my body. And I woke up. And the lovely Irish nurse who asked me for my next of kin's telephone number, her words were to me, she said, "It's good to see that smile again." And I said, "Is it over?" And she said, "Yes, yeah, it is. It's over." And so what had happened, they'd now wheeled me out of the ICU unit. There was a couple more, but nothing as dramatic, nothing as sexy. There's a few more where I've fallen back into my body. I remember that. And by that time, I knew what was going on, AJ. I knew that my mother was right. I got put onto the ICU unit, and the next morning, the paramedic, Rebecca, who first off was there when my first passing, I seen her come in onto the unit from the corner of my eye, and she came with another friend, and I heard her say to her friend, "There he is. I don't know how he's still alive. This is the bloke I'm telling you about." So she stood right next to me, and she was blown away. I don't know who was more blown away, me or her. She said, "We can't believe you survived." She said, "One, we thought was going to come to a body, because normally that's what happens. We don't come to anyone who survives." She said, "You lived on your own." So she said, and that was like even more mind blowing. How did you? She said, "Who made the telephone call to the emergency services?" No, I did. She was like, "No, you didn't." I went, "No, I did. It was me." I said, "There's no one in the house other than the cat." Right. So she was like, "Wow." And then she said, "We were parked up around the corner, literally around the corner, and we never parked there." She said, "So she said, it's all parked there anyway." And then your call comes in, your shout. And she said, "Yeah, and we expected you not to make it." She said, and then you had the experience where, in effect, you took your own life. And she said, "But when you came back," she said, "that's what, we hadn't even intervened yet, but you came back." So that's why she said, we took off as fast as we could from your house, because apparently they can't drive while resuscitating you. They have to stay where they are. Once you'd brought yourself back, we kept an eye on you until we got you to the hospital, and that's when it all started again. And okay, so she was blown away by that. And then the next person to make an appearance was the man who said, if this doesn't bring him round, nothing will. And he came to see me too. But he was even more blown away than the paramedic. He said, I'm telling you now, he said, you were verging on the miraculous. He went, I ain't never seen nothing like that before. He went, some of the things that happened in that theatre, I just don't understand. But he didn't tell me what. I said, can I ask you a question? I said, I sat on my forehead and I seen you with the defibrillator. And this is what you said. He went, that's what I said. He said, because we were at that point of we'll give up. He said, but something made us bring you round again. And he went, and that was the turning point for you. So we've resuscitated people, but not that amount of times. And he went, and what gets us the most? He said, is that your brain has taken a hit. We can see that. He said, but nothing the way it should have been. So it wasn't just, AJ, it wasn't just surviving it. It was actually trying to process what happened. Why did I survive? What did they mean? We were verging on the miraculous. He actually swore to me, and he looked left and right. He went, I'll tell you something, you are effing bizarre. That's what he said to me. Those were his exact words. And I just thought, by that time, I was on morphine. My teeth were cracked. My ribs were cracked. Oh, wow. Yeah, that was, yeah, mate. Hold on, it's going to be a hard ride. Yeah. So this is what I tried to give that perspective of. It's not, I'm sat by Jesus, and pretty frightening, to be honest with you. And many of us are suffering the same. Many of us are really feeling this. So it's not an easy thing.
What are your religious beliefs?
I believe there's a higher power. I'm not a specific prescriber to any Catholicism, Christianity, Islamism, Hinduism. I don't do any isms. I just stay away from it. I do very little reading because for me, I believe it dilutes my power. Why would I need to read somebody else when all of the answers are within and all I've got to do is listen? Which is what I've done up to this point. I've deliberately kept myself isolated from that form of train of thought. I believe that is a glass ceiling. I believe that, I know I'm going to be slated for saying that, but I don't really care. I've been there, I've seen it. I respect others' opinions and I expect them to respect mine. And if not, so be it. We'll argue about it on the other side. Many of those who choose to be in a heated discussion with me are those who've done an awful lot of research, but haven't actually been there themselves. Okay. And I can tell the ones who have reached the glass ceiling. I know the ones who are traumatized by their event because I'm a trained counselor and I'm a trained psychotherapist. It's my job to know that. It's my job to recognize these things because I operate in fields that I only have experience with. So I often tend to find those who are argumentative with me are very much lacking in experience, and because I don't need to argue. So I don't need to, and actually I don't even need to chew the cud because I know enough which satisfies me. I don't need to know anymore. And this is what I try to, this is why I stay away from really, if you want to call me, if you want to label me, yeah, I suppose you could say that I could be classed as a spiritualist, but I'd rather be known as a seer. And then whatever connotations you would like to put to that, well, what I try to answer. But I stay away from mainstream NDEism, should we say, because I believe it's quite corruptive. I think it's been captured by those who like to ride on the power that it gives them. I've had people contest me and say, oh, I've had 6 there. But I don't really care how many you've had, to be honest with you. It's how you use your experience. That's all I'm interested in. And I'll spot you straight away.
Do you think we are entering a new era of spiritual awakening?
I think because many of us are surviving, it is presenting a transformation. There's no doubt about that. I've noticed it. Many people and survivors who I've worked with are now starting to look at things from a transpersonal viewpoint of the more spiritual side of things. A lot is still unknown. I think many of us as survivors struggle with that side of it, what direction to take with it. It certainly changed my viewpoint very much. It's nice to talk to others. It's the acceptance. But again, AJ, that there's different levels of survivors. As there is with any kind of happening, there's different levels of severity. So that affects quite a high proportion of us who come back, and it affects us a different way. So yes, I would agree that the more of us who are surviving, more is being seen. How does it affect us when we come back? It's all love, light and joy. And I've seen Jesus and now my life's completely changed. I think that's beautiful. But there's another side to this, which is a really dark side, and that isn't what is spoken about, and that's where I step in. My experience was beautiful, amazing, but it was also very terrifying, and it's been very difficult since the event. But really, how often do you hear that story? There are people out there who talk about it, but it's not a sexy story, is it? Going to heaven and meeting God is a really sexy story. And there's an awful lot of that, but I just want to temper that with people that this is not what it is all about. I think a lot of the NDE survivors who are surviving are being caught up in this tsunami of spiritual, I've had this great awakening, and they're forgetting about the real side of it. It's almost as if they put the spiritual awakening in as a plaster. So it stops them really looking at the dark side of things. And to me, if you're not having a balance in life, then you have to make the books up in one way or another, and it can come through suffering. There are severe psychological issues to surviving this kind of event, and that shouldn't be forgotten. Many survivors have been forgotten, dismissed, been said they're suffering psychosis. So yeah, I believe, in answer to your question, it's great that we are more open to it. But being more open to it also brings an awful lot of issues with it. Personally, I like that there's been this transformation. I really enjoy it. I think it's a great thing. But are we awakening to it? Yes, I think we are. Many of us are coming back, but we're not understanding what is going wrong. And why can't I cope? Why does doing Reiki or being a healer or joining a healing trust, why does that not suffice? It's almost not enough. It's not enough, and this is where we start to crash, because after that, where do we turn to?
This has been the AJ Parr Spiritual Journalist Podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe.